that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello. Malazan. Book of the Fallen. Book 5. Out of 10. Midnight Tides. By Steven Erikson. Possibly my favorite. Maybe even above Memories of Ice. I need some time to fester. Think about that. We're here. Midnight Tides. Now, if you're watching this review, I imagine you want to know what this is about with as few spoilers as possible. And that's fair. I have to give one. It's not a huge thing, but it is important to know. It may influence whether or not you want to continue with this series. And I get it, because it's a lot of money to spend, to trust in this author, to deliver. But Steven has consistently proven himself, and have a bunch of people online and friends that back him. So, here's the thing. By the end of book 4, House of Change, you finally feel like you're kind of getting comfortable. Right? Like you kind of finally have a grasp on everything. Well, this book is, again, an entirely different continent, with only 2 returning characters. One overarching and one that we just met in the last one. And not only that, so you have to get used to new characters, a new place, a new setting, new lingo, new understanding of how this current structure is going, but this also takes place in the past. Not super far in the past, but in the past, because this takes place before Gardens of the Moon. This takes place while Malazan is still in control by Caliban and Dancer. This is before the night of the uprising. I don't know how long exactly, but it is before the uprising. It doesn't seem like there's any, from the little we get, it doesn't seem like it's about to erupt. So this is probably a few years before the events of Gardens of the Moon even begin. Could be wrong, but that's just something important to know if you're going to get into this. That is what's happening. That you are dealing with a story set in the past and an entirely different continent. It will matter. But your returning characters are Troll Sangar. We met him in the last book. This is actually heavily about him and his family. And, of course, our ever-favorite Crippled God. There's only 2 returning characters here, though. Once you get used to the new characters, once you get used to this new setting, it is easily the easiest story to kind of follow with, because unlike most of the other ones, this one is pretty straightforward, like all the way through. Once you get a grasp on the new characters, it is pretty much smooth sailing all the way forward. There's a lot going on, but there's a lot smaller cast of characters than last time to kind of get a hold on things. And without spoilers, we have the Sangar family. We have the Kingdom of Lether, which that side includes an entire set of brothers. The Beers Benedict, or Bennick, Hull Bennick, another Bennick that I'm forgetting, and T-Hole, we'll get to him. And then we have the Sangar family, and how there's about to be this big war crisis with these 2 peoples. And this book is ultimately about brotherly relationship. if you can even say it about the last one had the sister thing with Volson and Devore, even though it's not really like dived into. But this one very much is much more emotionally dived into that than I would say the previous one was. And it is just a phenomenal story from beginning to end. My absolute favorite takeaways from this. And, I liked Troll Sangar a lot in the last book, and he's only grown on me more. Like, I really like the character. But at the same time, there are some other ones that absolutely stole the show for me. And of course, was the kind of entrepreneur, I guess, this economics guy, T-Hole Bennick, and his manservant, Bug. Absolutely two of my favorite characters in this entire series so far. And Steven Erickson, I know you already finished these books and you're not watching this video, but if I do not get a bar scene or some sort of scene where I don't have Botchlin and Corblue, whatever, if I don't have that, Bug and Tahol, Tahol, and Croupy in a discussion together, I'm going to be very upset because that just sounds like absolute comedy gold. And if not, that's sad, but at least in my dreams, I can envision that because that sounds beautiful to me personally. But it's a really, I mean, this whole series, this whole Book of the Fallen is a tragedy, and there's much darkness and sadness. We also have this adjudicator, which very much every time I heard it, it kept making me think of. I'm not a big fan of the Disney canon Star Wars, but there's a video game, a Jedi Fallen Order, and there's this scene with Darth Vader where he says, "You have failed me, Inquisitor." For some reason, I kept saying that with Acquitter or whatever. Saren is interesting. I think there's room for her to become super duper compelling. I think they do a pretty good job here, but I wasn't entirely sold on her character necessarily. I didn't not like her, but I didn't love her either, I'd say. But the heart and butter of this entire thing is Troll and what happens with his family. And everything surrounding this whole conflict, which, again, this is another case of, there's this whole political thing going on, this big war about to happen, but ultimately it's the background of the higher things going on behind the scenes, like, again, with the crippled god. It's the same thing with Memories of Ice, it's the same thing here, there are bigger things at play here beyond what initially is there. There's also weird things with the Nazath house here, and this little girl named Kettle. And this is all without getting into spoilers, so I can't really tell you too much more, but it is a tragic tale of brothers, and they start off with this new war chief man, and there's this whole thing, I don't really want to get into, but there's this whole thing with, like, these seals that this culture, that's like their currency. That's what they get the seals, and one of the Lether steals some of the seals or kills some of the seals without permission. It's the whole thing. I'm kind of forgetting now. So long ago now that I read that, everything that happens at the end is more present in my mind. But that's what kind of causes this whole thing, and this war chieftain, whatever, he has the Sangar brothers go on this mission to retrieve a sword that was created by the crippled god, asked to be created by the crippled god by someone else. But point being, stuff happens from the mission onward, and things get worse and worse and worse. And without spoilers, that's really all I can dive into without getting into my notes. So, if you want more in-depth chapter by chapter, there's of course the wonderful resource on Spotify and YouTube and probably iTunes, but I wouldn't know because I don't use filthy iPhones. But the 10 Very Big Books podcast is an excellent resource if you want a more in-depth thing. I'm getting to spoilers though, If you don't want that, then you should go. But overall, this may be my favorite Malazan book so far, which is crazy because it doesn't have any returning characters. But this is going to be the last test of your strength, because it's the last big change before you finally have kind of convergence and consistency and mix and mashing of different characters and locations in the second half. So if you can get through this, then I think the second half will be a little bit more easier to get into. But I really love this one. Coming off of 3, which I really loved, I still felt like there were parts that were slow and I didn't care about. In book 4, we started with Karsa Orlong, and that whole thing I loved to death. I really did. And then as soon as we got back to present day, it was much more of a mixed bag. Much more of a mixed bag. So then I come here and I have to get used to all new characters. But the difference is with all of these characters, there isn't a single time that I was bored. And that's all subjective, right? I know that everything's important, but there are parts that I would love to read and parts I'm like, okay, well, this is Steven Erikson, so I know it's going to be important, but I'm not necessarily enjoying reading it. But that never happened here. For all 933 pages, I was engaged with the text. I enjoyed every single bit of it. I don't know if it's because it's just a little bit of a smaller cast of characters, but it had me engaged throughout. And if you've been pushing along and you're not absolutely certain, please try this one. And if you're still not feeling it, you're probably not going to feel it, and you could drop it off. But then again, you've pushed through 5. Why not do 5 more, But overall, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's my, No, it's my favorite book of Malazan so far. Malazan, whatever. Please read it. Please read it. I'll try to get into more of the nuances of everything and spoilers, but non-spoiler wise, that's about the gist. Check it out. It's worth your time. It's great. It also deals with themes of capitalism and things like that without necessarily, because if Steven Erikson was a good writer, or just like, oh, capitalism is bad, and that'd be the end of it. But it's much more nuanced than that. It's not good, but it's also not bad. It is a nuanced thing there, as Erikson always loves to do. With that, I'm getting spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, there's the door. See you in a moment. Alright, spoilers now, baby. Could be a bit of a jumbled mess, but starting with the prologue, we meet Scabandri, this Tisti Eater, who could also turn into a dragon, like another Tisti Andy we know. We meet Silchus Ruin, who is betrayed, and Scabandri betrays Ruin, and it's kind of the whole thing of the entire Tisti Eater society is founded on a lie, that Ruin betrayed Scabandri, but it was the reverse. There's also this interesting thing that's talked about with Rake's brother, Grease, due to what Scabandri did. And Rake used to be Irake, like his name used to be Irake. And Ruin was a brother, like an older or younger brother, I forget. We also meet this interesting god named Mal, who is in control of the seas. He's the Elder Lord of the Seas. Also Gothos Jagat, which I believe we've met before, if I remember correctly, in a previous book. Also made a character named Withel. He's bald, and he makes a sword for the Cripple God, because the Cripple God commands it. And then we jump into Book 1, Frozen Blood, where we get reintroduced to Troll Sangar, and we meet Tomad Sangar, who is the father of the troll. We meet Benatis Sangar, a brother to Troll. We meet Fear Sangar, the eldest brother, and Roled Sangar, the youngest brother, and Hanan Mozag, who is the war chieftain or whatever. Also Midik Bun. Fear is definitely that oldest brother sort of thing, of kind of stuck in tradition, super obedient to authority, and you know, that sort of thing. Whereas Troll is much more of the questioning sort of person. And then the youngest, Rullet, he just wants to be with the cool kids. He wants to be with the older brothers and impress them and make them approve of him. Udinus is this slave slash, what's the word for? I forget the term that they used, but basically he's a servant to this family. Hanan Mozag's war and death payment. I don't remember what I meant by that at this point, but there's lots and lots of politics in here. This is the most like Game of Thrones feeling in terms of like actually giving me like politics in the world, because usually I feel like Steven Erikson kind of like avoids that. Not like avoids it, because even much does do a lot of super intellectual stuff throughout it, but it always feels like the day-to-day politics is usually ignored for whatever's going on. I mean, I guess the second book is all about a rebellion, but again, that's more like military. Like this felt like very like politic heavy. Politics is a lot different from like the military aspect of it. So I don't know. Anyway, it's very refreshing. We meet a character named Featherwitch. Also meet a character named Baruch the Pale. We get introduced to Saren Pedic, who I mentioned in non-spoilers. King Esgola Disner, who I believe is king of Lether. Meet Quillis, which I believe is the prince. Meet Holbedic. T. Holbedic and Bug, which are the best comedy duos in quite some time. Love them. Character named Chalice. We also meet Razar, Fared, and Shand, who are people that T-Hole's like trying to like, I don't know, this might be too early, but he is going to use them to like do all this finance, economic stuff that, if it wasn't for 10 Big Books podcast, I'd have no idea. Also Beers Bedic. Beers, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of like Beers, but with a B. But he's super cool. He also goes by Fanad, which can be a bit confusing at times, because they also go by like titles. And we also made a character named Kuro Kwan, Sita, Maroc, Shirk, who's like Shirk Alail, who's like this dead lady, who wants to be pretty. Also, later wants to become a pirate. I don't know, but she's super funny. There's a nice scene early on in this section with Tahol and Beers, where Beers tries to like understand his brother, and you know Tahol is no slump. He's super smart, and they just have this interesting conversation. You know, he's like, "Do you even care about the family stuff that's going on right now?" And I can't fully give it justice, but I live for those little scenes, and that was one of my go-tos here. We meet this mysterious kettle girl who is having people die so that they could feed the soil, which is fun. And this, I actually got this spoiled for me as like a concept, though I think it's kind of been hinted at before. But I saw this video by Mike's Book Reviews or something like that, and he gave a video non-spoiler on Malazan, Book of the Fallen. One of the things he mentioned is that gods in this universe can die when they become nameless and forgotten. So like there's this give and take with gods in this world where they need followers, they need people that are devout, because the more people believe in them, the more people worship them, the stronger they are. Whereas if you have no one worshiping you, if no one knows your name, no one practices your religion, then you cease to be relevant and you just disappear. Kind of like how nobody celebrates or worships. I mean, there probably are some, but most individuals today don't worship like Zeus or Thor. And it's going to be a thing where atheists go, yeah, you can be one more god than you, or whatever. But that's not what we're talking about today. The point is, in this setting, gods are absolutely real, but they can cease to be if you simply stop believing them, which gives a give and take where gods have this vast power and they can offer you a lot, but without you, they can't exist. So there's kind of that give and pull thing there. Last with that too, as we've been seeing throughout the series, people that are just mortals can ascend to godhood. But yeah, that's the end of book 1. Then we enter book 2. So they go on this quest, the Sangar family, the Sangar brothers, to go and capture this sword. Though Hanan Mozag makes it explicitly clear, make sure to use like wool or something. Do not grab that sword with your bare hands. I warned you. They get attacked by these big wolves, though, and Roled grabs the sword to fight them off, only to die immediately, holding the sword, and no one can get it off of him. But it's okay, because he ends up on this island with a tent, where the crippled god is hanging out, and the crippled god promises him power and wealth and everything that he's ever dreamed of or wanted. He just has to accept it. And he gets brought back to life with the sword's power and the crippled god's influence. There's also this amazing discussion that the crippled god does to kind of like convince Rolad with peace, and how peace is just waiting for war, because peace breeds stagnation, and with stagnation breeds, I mean, I don't want to get super crazy, but I'm recording this in October of 2024. Okay? I don't care about politics. I did. For a while. But in the grand scheme of things, to me it doesn't matter. Rome only existed for 2,000 years, and then it crumbled. Rome no longer is what it once was. And the United States has existed for a very long time. Will it exist forever? I doubt it. At least given the course of human history. But here's the thing. Okay? If there is no conflict, or any particular huge, obvious, like World War II is one of the most black and white things we've ever had. I mean, Nazis? Everyone else. You had the people that allied with the Nazis, and then everyone else. There's no fits of gray there. I mean, you can find it in between individual soldiers or something. Maybe their family was under threat. If they didn't obey and do bad things to other people, then their family would suffer. There's complexities there. But in terms of the thing as a whole, and I'm not trying to get too off topic, but like that was a very black and white situation. There's no grayness there. There's good and there is evil. This is like one of the few times where we've had such a clear picture of that. But when you don't have that, when you don't have a clear Nazi, I'm going to get flagged for using that term. When you don't have a clear villain or a clear antagonist in your day-to-day life, the battle becomes within, with each other. Nowadays, it's you're evil if you're this, you're evil if you're that, instead of people just being people. I mean, there are certainly evil people in the world, but to classify everyone as it, who just simply disagrees with you, you got Republicans saying that leftist people are evil, or you got leftist people saying that Republicans are evil, and it's just like, it's all just noise, like in a million years we'll all be dead, none of this will matter. I'm not trying, there's the point is that Cripple God makes the argument that peace is just like a biding time for war, and that war is created regardless of peace, because peace exists. I don't even necessarily agree with the premise. It's just something that he uses as a means to convince Rolad to accept the offer, but it's still something interesting to ponder, because again, and you can see this nowadays, like we're not in an active war. There's stuff going on around the world, and there's complications and everything. And I'm not a political person. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm not saying that this is that or that is that. I'm just saying that there is complexity in the world, and there's nuance there. But we so easily fit people in the boxes and make people our villains. And I think, if anything, what this series does for me, and I already think I am. I mean, I've tried very hard. I've tried so very hard to be a very empathetic person. Not sympathetic, because sympathetic is devoid of the emotion. Sympathetic is like, yeah, man, you're throwing up. That sucks, but you don't really care. It's not a matter to be like, I empathize. I'm so sorry that you have to go through that. You know, like there's a different thing there, and I always try to be empathetic. Because being empathetic makes you understanding to everyone, regardless of race, religion, creed, political affiliation. Like, everybody's people. And most people are just trying to do the best they can. Anyway, so this series, all about compassion, about love. Ultimately, compassion and love kind of go hand in hand. Not necessarily romantic love, just love. This is a long tangent to say it was an interesting thing that the cripple god mentioned. It was something of a truth coded in wrongness in order to get his way. Very much what a gaslighter / manipulator would do, which the cripple god is also very good at. I spent way too much time on this particular topic. And Rolly comes back to life, and it's absolutely terrifying because he was dead for a while, so they started putting all these gold stuff on him. This kind of like their ancient tradition when somebody dies, and so he wakes up screaming in pain because, yeah. Also, just something to know, because there was this slight conversation for some reason. Just want you all to know for 100% fact that Malazan is not flat. The world of Malazan is indeed on a planet, which means that there's a solar system in this universe. I don't know if we'll ever see it, but there is a solar system. So if you want to make a series, if Erickson wanted to write like a sci-fi series, hear me out. You could still do it in the Malazan setting. It may not even have to be on the same planet, but you could theoretically do that. You could pull a Cosmere and do that if you really wanted to, because they specifically have a conversation about how Malazan isn't flat. So just for all you Malazan flatters out there, well, it might be a flat piece of paper, but within the three-dimensional space of our minds, where we envision all of this stuff, we got another planet, baby. Anyway, that's just this little thing there. What the cripple god does with Roled and the Eater in general, basically, Roled comes back, proclaims himself emperor, takes his brother's betrothed, who he lusted after, makes her his queen, and says, I'm going to take over everything, I'm now going to be emperor, and everybody just kind of falls in line with that. But he uses we a lot. And there are times in here where he acts a lot like the Panian Seer. Maybe not as vicious, but he certainly has moments where it makes me go, Because ultimately, there's a whole thing with the third book and what that all meant and who was actually pulling the strings there. But no matter what, no matter how they circle that around with the Jaghut, at the end of the day, the overall gist of everything going on was because of the crippled god. So very much is kind of the same thing here that's happening again. Or happened first, I should say. And then we jump over to book 3. The tower, the Azath Tower, has a talk with Beers, which is interesting. There's this really uncomfy, I'm not going to delve in it too much. 10 Very Big Book Podcast did an excellent job talking about it. I don't want to. There's this very uncomfortable scene where Roled goes to have sex with his wife, but she doesn't want to. But it talks about, as it gets into it, how she is able to kind of find pleasure in it at some point if she has to do it. And it's just a very uncomfy part of the book, and it's very much, something Erickson likes to do. And about things, whether it's positive or negative, is just something that just bothers, just makes me uncomfortable. There's a fun quote that destiny is justification for atrocity. Like, you could say, this is my destiny. There's this wonderful conversation at Troll House with his brother Fear, as he expresses his doubts about what's going on, and fear kind of chastises him for it. But it's a wonderful, every scene with them is wonderful. And then Rolla acts like the biggest dick you've ever seen, and you start to hate this kid. Like, you just want the worst for him. But then Steven Erikson immediately draws us back by giving us this scene with Rolla breaking down almost in tears in private with Udenis or Udenas or whatever the fudge his name is. But it's absolutely like, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, Rolla, what you're suffering, you know. And it does an amazing job of showing compassion. Kettle is a human corpse, but housing a Forkle Sail soul. We also get introduced to a interesting new character named Iron Bars, who is a Crimson Guard. I make a note of that because, as I'm sure that will become a bigger part in the Bone Hunters, but then we have the novel by Ian C. Alsamont, Return to the Crimson Guard. Iron Bars and Avowed, whatever that explicitly means, but it's interesting. There's this fun conversation that Whittle has with the crippled god, and he says how the crippled god destroys sympathy toward himself, despite the fact, like, Whittle can almost feel bad for the crippled god if he didn't, but the things that the crippled god continuously does kind of like destroys any ounce of sympathy that somebody could have toward him, and he does it to himself. But there's also, and I may be like reading too far into this, but there's this moment where the crippled god notices that Whittle is lonely, so provides him, like, a woman pops up onto the beach, and she's naked, and but he stole this person from somewhere else. And, Whittle's obviously upset by that. But it almost feels like the crippled god genuinely can't understand. Like, he's like, oh, you don't have any gratitude? He's like, the nerve to ask for gratitude. And the crippled god seems to genuinely, like, not understand. This is, like, all he knows is to take, destroy, and manipulate. And so to him, plucking somebody and bringing somebody for Whittle is like, I'm being nice. Like, I realize you're lonely. Here's somebody else to keep you company. But he doesn't realize, like, his method is just so bad. I think there's more nuance there. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, but it feels like the crippled god wasn't trying to be, like, malicious necessarily in that scene. He was generally trying to do something decent, but he did it in a horrible way. There's a fun conversation T-Hole has about how there will always be poor people. He's like, say you make everybody rich, but then some people are going to not be careful with the money that they've earned. Some people are going to splurge the moment they get that instant gratification. Like, let's say we each got $1 trillion tomorrow. Some of us are going to do a good job of paying off our bills or putting that into savings, like spending that wisely. Someone else is going to spend that on fancy cars and fancy house. Before you know it, all their money's gone, and then they're poor, and then they won't be able to pay for the house, and then they will be back on the street. But then also there's circumstance, and it's not just people's fault, but people like to assume that if somebody's poor, it must be their fault, and there's this whole perpetual cycle of hierarchy with that. And this is kind of the thing of criticism of capitalism. We don't have true capitalism here in America. We have capitalism, socialism. It's in the middle between the two. Anyway, so ultimately the whole discussion boils down to, like, no matter what, you're going to have poor people. And what are you going to do with that at that point? And there's more to that. I'm not remembering as much because, I've been reading, it's my day off since like 2 p.m. and it's now like 8 p.m. heading toward 9. So I've just breezed through a lot. It took my time, but still, like, this is hours ago now. Which is why I try to do these thoughts. I tried to do like 2 to 3 part thoughts videos, but I just couldn't I just couldn't put it down. Like, I put it down obviously because I had to go to bed and go to work, but any chance I got, I was reading it, and I just never thought to stop and talk about what I'd already had so far. So, regardless, So it was an interesting conversation. But yeah, there's a part near this section of the book where we finally see that. So the Malazan Empire does exist by this point because they mentioned Emperor Caliban. Because I didn't know where this exactly fit into the timeline, but Emperor Caliban is in charge, but the usurpation by Malazan has not happened yet. And then we reach book 4, the title of the book itself, even though this novel is book 5, Midnight Tides, but book 4 in here is Midnight Tides. So Bug talks about the Warrens / Holds, and it's very interesting. Almost like it's making fun of, it wasn't, because I think this came out before the show did, but Avatar Last Airbender has like the 4 elements, water, earth, fire, air. And there's a bunch of different concepts of that in literature anyway. But he says, like, no, like, the things we have here are the light, shadow, life, death, and ice. And Mikra, Menace, and Tears are different substructures of the magic, I think. And mages find Warrens most attuned to their nature. This is a whole interesting thing that kind of made that magical stuff make a little bit more sense. It also reiterated, or said first, depending on publication, what Knight of Knives said, which is that, anybody can technically learn this if they take the time to learn for years and years. They will become masters of it. And then there are other people who are just born with talent. They just have a natural affinity for it. Now, there's a part of the book where we have a forkful sail fight the Sangar family, and its name is Serenity. Now, tinfoil hat, come with me, folks. Tinfoil hat, put it on. Okay, I could be off my rocker. Okay, and I'm not the smartest tool in the shed. Okay, I'm not. I recognize that. I recognize I'm not the smartest person on the planet. I'm far from it. I'm probably pretty low IQ, but stick with me. Stick with me for a moment. Stick with the brain noggin just for a moment. And if I'm full of it, that's okay. That's okay. Okay, the forkful sail's name is Serenity. What is a simile for serenity? Peace. Right? Peace. Usually with peace you have calm. So, ladies and gentlemen, is Serenity the forkful sail the same forkful sail from the last book that Karsa Orlong helped free? Could be off my rocker entirely, but possibly. I could be completely wrong here, but still, thought it interesting to mention my little thought brain there. And then there's just this nice moment before everything goes to hell in a handbasket, where the brothers just have a nice moment to laugh, including Roland. An all-out war, and there's fighting, and there's death and destruction. Hull starts getting beaten in an alleyway. I also forgot to mention, like, Roled got his wife pregnant, and then he asked his brother Fear to raise the child and to be with the wife. It was a whole thing, very awkward, very uncomfortable. But then she dies with the baby. And then T-Hole's getting attacked. He's getting beat up. Bug finds him, freaks out, and screams, making all of these Tisty Eater, making their skin break apart, and they basically, like, blow up, and their blood and guts, bones everywhere. Like, they just are just eviscerated. Like, they're just blown away in the most literal sense. And it's a pretty baller scene. He basically just screamed. He's kind of like that one Marvel Inhuman, the Thunderbolt, or not Thunderbolt. Somebody in the comments will know who I'm talking about. It's kind of like that. That's what it sounded like. It was very cool. And then we find out a truth about our friend Bug here. Bug is in fact male. Right. He's the, what did we say a couple books ago? The Elder Lord of the Seas from the prologue. That is, in fact, Bug, my friends. Tear and Bug's friendship, like beyond just being absolute comedic geniuses throughout this whole book, are generally one of the most. I don't think I've been this moved by friendship in fiction in a long time. The little last time was another Malazan book, and that was Mappo and Ikarum in Book 2, Deadhouse Gates. But since then, I have not felt such ever since that, and I found it again with Bug and Teal. They are personally some of my favorite characters. If you don't know this about me, and this is why it makes it hard, there's two reasons why I don't usually read Malazan, like on a lunch break or something, is because one, sometimes these chapters are absurdly long. So actually, I got to one, these chapters can be sometimes absurdly long. Sometimes they're fine, but sometimes they go up to like 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever. And I only got 30 minutes on my breaks. I can't do that. But secondly, I try to like really hone in and pay attention, and I can't really do that when I'm working. And then lastly, I also like to do the voices because I'm a weirdo. So I did different voices for all the characters. But when it came to T-Hole, it was just my voice. I didn't intentionally do that. I didn't know this character beforehand. It just kind of happened naturally. And Bug, I kind of make talk like this. I don't know why, even though it's meant to be an old man. But I didn't want to give him like a generic old man voice. So I just started making him talk like this. When I get around to it, Master. Yeah, sure, Master. Do you want some tea, Master? I would love some tea, Bug. Why, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, maybe that's also personally why I felt so connected to them. I don't know. I'm just telling you because it was fun for me. And then we have fierce reflection on how all the conversations he had Patrol in the back of his mind, and you could even feel that in earlier chapters that he really believed what his brother was saying, but he's kind of like in denial, like he had to stay on that role, that goal, that what do the tradition, the right thing to do was to follow the orders of his king or emperor or whatever. And we see a lot of why Troll is a sad, sad boy. I also completely skipped over, way earlier on, Saren gets raped. And honestly, they did good stuff with it later on, but still, like, I feel like we had enough happen in this book that we didn't need that. But alas, it happened. But I thought I'd mention it. It is rough, the series sometimes to deal with all that. But there's a lot more that could be said, but I'm one man, and I don't want to take this on forever. So that's kind of where it ends. There's so much stuff that I'm missing. Again, 10 Very Big Books podcast. Please go check them out if you haven't. I'm sure they'll go even more in depth than I did. But those are some of my thoughts and some of my spoiler thoughts on this book. But I think it's absolutely phenomenal. I think it's one of the best books that Steven Erikson has written so far. And again, like, it's a commitment, like you're like, I'm finally starting to get it, and then you just throw me for a loop here, and I totally get it. But knowing Erikson, I trust with 100% certainty that for the second half of the series, it's gonna all play together. It's all gonna fit. It's all gonna matter. So, and I'm sure people that are veterans can attest to that, and I trust that. So, I'm willing to see where it goes forward because I've been enjoying it so much. Or this particular book, like I said, I was very, very mixed on House of Chains after the Carcel Long sections, and then became Present Day. But pretty much all the way through, I loved all of it. So, anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give a thumbs up, share your episode a ton, and I'll see you in the next video when we discuss, probably not in one video like I did this one, but when I do my thoughts on The Bone Hunters, Book 6 of the Book of the Fallen Malazan series by Steven Erikson. Till then, guys, if you have a brother or a sibling, if you still live with them, give them a hug. If you don't, give them a call. If something terrible has happened to them, then have a drink. Have a piece of cake or a cookie or your favorite non-alcoholic drink, whatever, in their memory, in their honor. And as this book is mostly about brothers. and maybe really strong friendships that may be brotherly, I guess, with Teal and Bug. And poor Troll Sangar, man. And then where we see him at the start of House of Change, just got Gangantic break. But thank you, Steven Erikson, so much for this book. I mean, I think I was like 3 years old when this book came out, but regardless, thank you so much for it. I'm glad that, years later I could finally read this series and appreciate it and enjoy it for the first time on my own. So that's going to be it for this one. If you can't tell, I just smile on my face for pretty much all of it because I really, really love this one. This holds a special place. It really resonated with me in a way that a lot of them just haven't. And I'm excited to see what the second half of the series gets into and what we're going to see. Now that we've kind of explored all the new places and we can finally just have intermingling of characters, locations, and see how that all fits and comes together in the end. And I'm excited. But anyway, guys, until next time, have compassion for your fellow man. And maybe have some tea. I know Teal and Bug would. Until next time.